What are the consequences? Canadians are expecting consequences, and we are not seeing any consequences with Justin Trudeau and his corrupt government.
Welcome back to Northern Perspective, everyone. I'm Ryan.
And I'm Tanya.
And we were telling everybody that we had another interview lined up with a special guest, someone who had been on the channel before. And many of you really, really love this gentleman, have given him many nicknames. So we are pleased to welcome back to the channel Mr. Larry Brock. Mr. Brock, welcome back to Northern Perspective.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Tanya.
Thank you for coming. You're our first in-studio guest. This is super exciting.
This is fantastic. I'm curious about the nicknames.
They're all
Can you share some?
positive. The Brockinator.
Okay.
Brock'em Sock'em Robots. Brock Norris.
One of my favorites is Brookie Balboa. I think it all started way back. We used to have kind of a theme song for some of the MPs you included. So it was Can't Stop the Rock. So it was Can't Stop the Brock. So whenever you came on, we had like an 8-second clip played, and it was a bunch of clips of you pointing at MPs very intimidatingly.
Yes,
so
yeah. As I was pointing at Tom Clark yesterday.
Absolutely.
Right, yes.
And we had Michael Cooper. He was TNT from AC/DC.
Okay.
So, and then Pierre, I think we had
Hero from Foo Fighters.
Foo Fighters, yeah.
Well, just for your audience and for your information, we have a nickname for Michael Cooper as well.
Oh, yeah?
We call him the Coop Dog. Okay? Because he can bark. He can really bark.
Yes. He sure can. He's very unassuming when you just see him sitting there, but
extremely unassuming. Yes.
But
He'll get you.
He will. He definitely will. So
well, that's great. Happy to be here and happy to educate Canadians.
So there's been a lot of work done on procurement by the Conservatives. We've seen ArriveScan. We've seen the SDTC scandal. We've seen now the $9 million condo scandal. What goes through your team's heads when you're faced with it seems like the procurement system alone is bursting at the seams with corruption? Like, what goes through your heads when these new scandals come up?
Well, it towards the end of the last session, there really wasn't a week that did not go by that another piece of that scandal was exposed. So really, it was no small wonder that a lot of the leading national newspapers were reporting on this really failed, broken, liberal procurement system, and then opining that really this is the tip of the iceberg. And it's not really confined to a couple of ministries. We're talking government-wide inefficiencies with procurement, with one side not knowing what the other is doing. There is no communication, there's no oversight, there's no accountability, no one is called to task. It's let's keep it under the low radar map until it gets exposed. And that's not how government should be operating. So we intend, once we form government, to completely overhaul that procurement system. And I'm not going to get into details of our platform at this juncture, but you can expect a different way, a more efficient way, a more transparent and accountable way of delivering for Canadians.
And I think one of the other pieces that has come to light, and the Conservatives have remarked on this, Canadians are endlessly perplexed about this, is this complete lack of accountability from the minister and their office. Whether it comes to foreign interference or procurement, it's always, well, I didn't read that email, or my office didn't know about it, or, well, that's not really, our purview. And which leads Canadians and us to ask, well, then what's the point of a minister of procurement if you're not going to be accountable for procurement?
Yeah. Bang on correct there, Ryan. I hearken back to my Crown Attorney days, and it's a concept that's not often used in the Canadian legal system, but certainly used in the United States. But I think it has application here. It's plausible deniability, and it's the ministers who have an absolute requirement, some might say even a constitutional requirement, to be accountable for their own department. And I have had many opportunities of having many interventions with ministers, particularly in the last session. And I routinely, and I do this deliberately, I research for the mandate letters that the Prime Minister had provided to them, and consistently in those mandate letters is a phrase about, and again, the buzzwords are always there. We want to be accountable. We want to be transparent to Canadians. We owe it to Canadians to be good stewards of the taxpayer funds. Everything that he's done over the last 9 years is the complete opposite. But there is provisions in those mandate letters that say as follows, Justin Trudeau's words: we are not machines. We are humans. We are going to make mistakes. I expect when a mistake is made, essentially you don't run and duck and hide. You own up to it. You apologize. And you promise Canadians you're going to do better, that you've learned from that experience, and you'll make the necessary changes. Have we seen any aspect of that with any of the ministers who have literally been caught red-handed being complicit in the corruption of this government? I challenged Anita Anand. I challenged Jean-Yves Duclos. I've challenged many ministers by reading out those passages. And again, a complete non-answer when I point out the obvious. Someone has to take responsibility. You can't be blaming A, B, C, D, and E, who are going to be doing the very same thing. It's no small wonder that the former clerk of the Privy Council, Michael Warnock, opined that in all of his years of being a public servant, most highest level of public service, he was just flabbergasted at the finger pointing and the amount of deceit and lying at committee. What are the consequences? Canadians are expecting consequences, and we are not seeing any consequences with Justin Trudeau and his corrupt government.
And do you think that is because much of the accountability in Parliament is from a time where more people believed in the word honor, more people believed in the word integrity, and if you committed an ethics violation back in 1890, it would essentially ruin your reputation within the community. Yeah. But now it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, absolutely, Ryan. And this harkens back, and I've said this story to several people in several groups, maybe not to the two of you, but as many of you know, and you know yourself, and many of your viewers know, I had a very, very proud, successful career as a lawyer. Before entering politics, 18 years as a Crown attorney. I have been a political aficionado in my entire life. There really wasn't a day that didn't go by that I wasn't taping committee or QP and watching it at the end of my day before I went to bed. But what I saw over time was that gradual erosion of trust and disrespect with the word politics or politician. And you're right. When I grew up as a young lad, I held these individuals in in high esteem. I revered them. They were honorable. In fact, we still refer, as you know, ministers as the honorable minister. The speaker refers to every member, the honorable member. Okay, and that's a custom that bestowed integrity and in credibility to that member who represented the voice of their community. But when you engage in the kinds of games that Justin Trudeau and his government are doing, you're going to see that erosion of trust. You're going to see that erosion of credibility. And I wanted to do politics different. I wanted to bring back the true sense of integrity, character, credibility. And that's why I chose to leave a very successful career and make a difference not only for my own community, but for this country. I wanted to restore that trust. I wanted to restore that confidence. And we will have that with our next great Prime Minister, Pierre Poilievre.
And he says many times in his speeches, and I think it resonates with Canadians, that he and the Conservatives want to essentially restore the perception and the balance of power so that members of Parliament are servants and not master anymore. Michael Barrett, as many people may know, has I believe it's a private member's bill to look at imposing tougher fines and actual accountability should members break ethics laws, should they be held in contempt of Parliament. I don't think there's any chance of that passing before the end of the session, given that A, it's a Conservative bill, and B, it's a private member's bill. So for Canadians that are just weary of the lack of accountability, is that going to be something that is then brought forward in, when the Conservatives form government as a government bill possibly later?
I think the answer is obvious. I think Michael Barrett bringing forward that bill telegraphs the philosophy of our party, that when you misbehave, when you act dishonorably, when you act unethically, and there is a finding of guilt under the Conflict of Interest Act, as you know, the penalties right now are just
what
pitiful.
Penalties?
Absolutely pitiful. Name and shame, or a very modest monetary penalty. I believe it's $500.
Yeah.
That is not significant enough for the damage, the reputational damage that Justin Trudeau and his ministers, and quite frankly, Ryan, I have lost track of how many ministers, in addition to the Prime Minister, in addition to his backbench MPs, who have been found guilty of ethical violations. Isn't that a sad statement in and of itself?
Well, even the current Speaker of the House was found guilty of an ethics violation. So
precisely. But I think you're right. I think that telegraphs the approach that our government is going to take.
And Pierre has spoken about anti-corruption laws prior to affordability, hitting the top of the public interest. I think that's going to be something that Canadians are going to be very interested in hearing when the Conservatives release their full platform. Is if there is going to be a structured approach to what the anti-corruption laws are going to be once Conservatives take government. So we will all be patiently awaiting when the full platform is released, when an election is announced. In terms of procurement, so for those that don't know, there was an event recently in the Oakville West riding. Was it Oakville West? I forget what
last
the new
night.
Riding. Yeah,
Oakville East.
Oakville East in the new
Yes.
boundaries, and there was some discussion regarding ArriveCan, and Mr. Jennis was there. And one question that I actually asked was, as part of the government waste that is going on, are the Conservatives aware of the internal rule that Shared Services Canada has, and I believe even Public Works has, where no matter what contract that a government entity spends, there is a mandatory 10% administration fee that they take off the top for no reason. So when I was purchasing software for my agency, if I purchased a piece of software for $1,000, they would take 100. If I purchased a system for $100,000, or if my costs for hosting were $100,000, they would take 10,000. So to me, that doesn't make sense, because now what you're essentially doing is you were inflating every piece of technology spent in the government by an additional 10%. And that's millions and millions, hundreds of millions of dollars per year, because the government spends a lot of money there. There was a bathroom built at an agency and it was a one-seater, one-sink, accessible bathroom. $100,000 was spent on that. So it's great to hear you say that there's going to be a complete overhaul, because I think this procurement system is so broken that it almost needs to be torn down to the studs and rebuilt from scratch, because there's process upon process upon process, and it's convoluted, and it just doesn't make sense. So Stephanie Koozie and Kelly Block, they have their work cut out for them, don't they?
Well, we all do. Let's face it, there is a lot of work to undo the damage that Trudeau has caused in the last 9 years. We are all ready for the task. In addition to, obviously, those great potential colleagues of mine who will be elected in the next election.
So I was speaking with somebody recently about just the state of Canada and the work that the Conservative Party has. And I'd remarked to them that I don't envy Pierre and the Conservatives, because not only do you have to fix a broken government, you have to heal an entire country because of the divisions that this Liberal government has caused. Obviously, a lot of attention is going into the problems with the government, and a plan is being put together in how to address that. How do you heal a country that is this divided after Trudeau and his Liberals?
It's very simple. You speak to all Canadians with one voice, one consistent voice. And you not only say how you're going to make their lives better and improve their situation, but you actually follow through on it. You know, we often use this phrase, ever since I became elected, is that the Trudeau government gets an A in announcements, but an F in follow-up. And that really has been the trademark and the hallmark of his administration. It's been nothing but photo ops, smiles, handshakes, you know, small little rallies here and there, rah, rah, rah. We really love you, Mr. Prime Minister, and love what your government is doing. And then they completely drop the ball in delivering for all Canadians. Take, for instance, the carve-out on the carbon tax. Okay, he had a riot on his hand with his Atlantic MPs who were demanding an exemption. He gave that exemption. What about the rest of Canada? Okay, the issue of $10 daycare. Where is that promise of affordability? Where is that promise of allowing people who chose, men or women who chose to be the caretakers of their home and raise their children? Where is that sort of love and sort of assistance for those rural families who don't have access to those $10 daycare centers? You know, so these are just a couple of examples, Ryan, of how he has isolated Canadians and not delivered for all of Canada. Our leader, the next Prime Minister, Pierre Poilievre, all of his policies, all of the direction, everything that he is going to announce is going to benefit all of Canada from coast to coast to coast.
Now, one of the things that Trudeau said when he was campaigning is that this is going to be the most transparent government in Canadian history. And I think we've seen that it has been the most opaque government in Canadian history. What do the Conservatives say to Canadians that don't believe that they'll ever see transparency in government. How are you going to change that?
Day one. Day one, our leader has proudly stated consistently that we are going to axe the tax. We are going to eliminate the carbon tax. If we demonstrate what we've been talking about and we demonstrate action on day one and continue delivering on those promises progressively after the election, that incrementally is going to telegraph to Canadians, this is a leader, this is a party that is genuine, that is legitimate, that cares deeply for Canadians and will deliver. We have to start delivering on day one, Ryan, and continue to deliver. That's how we restore confidence.
I used to work with some really smart people when I was in the private sector. And one gentleman, his name was David Patton, and he had a saying when it came to earning trust and keeping his integrity, and he called it a say-do ratio, and that you need to keep your say-do ratio as close to 1-to-1 as possible. So, to your point, the Conservatives say they're going to axe the tax. That's your say, and then as long as that's followed up, then that's a 1-to-1 say-do ratio. So I see that as exactly the same, in that as long as the Conservatives deliver on the promises that they have been putting out to Canadians, repealing Bill C-11, repealing Bill C-18, C-70, like there's so many repealing actions that the government has to do. You guys may do an omnibus bill to just take care of that. But I agree. I think that will slowly build back trust, that they can trust the government.
Yeah. Let's face it, it's not going to happen overnight. We need a solid majority, a super majority. I'm keeping my fingers crossed. We need a long runway to accomplish everything that we need to do, not only to deliver for Canadians, to right the ship, to have this as a prominent, well-respected nation on the world stage, but also to deliver for Canadians on a day-to-day basis. And that's going to start on day one, but it's going to take a number of days, obviously, to achieve that.
So what were you hearing during the summer circuit that Canadians need right now?
I have, Tanya, that's a great question. I have been canvassing not only in my riding, but neighboring ridings, swing ridings. I've been canvassing in other parts of the country outside of the province. And consistently what I'm hearing is change. This is time for a change. I'm hearing from people who traditionally have never voted Conservative, would never consider themselves as someone who would support Conservative policies, but they see themselves so isolated from the Trudeau brand of liberalism. The Trudeau brand of liberalism is unlike former administrators. Chrétien, Martin, I can name a number of individuals. They feel not welcome. They feel isolated. They feel that he has not delivered. He has failed to deliver on the promises that he's made over the last 9 years. He's made life miserable for them. And these are people from all walks of life. I could be knocking on a home or a townhouse or an apartment with someone who's living paycheck to paycheck, or I could be walking the streets with Conservative candidate Ron Chinsner in a very affluent part of Oakville East, where medium incomes are probably $1 million plus and homes probably have a property value of $3 million plus. The same message. We need change. This government is not delivering. We are confident that what Pierre Poilievre is saying, he is legitimate, he is genuine, and he will deliver for all of Canada. That's what I've been hearing.
In those travels, and we've asked some of the Conservative candidates this when we've interviewed them. What are some of the most powerful conversations you've had with Canadians? Do any stick out? Any particular conversations? Do you carry them with you?
Great question, and I'm going to reflect personally in response to that answer. As I told you earlier, I've been a political aficionado. Prior to me becoming a candidate, I have been part of the federal conservative movement in my riding, provincial conservative movement, and from time to time, municipally. In fact, I was the president of the federal EDA leading up to my decision to become the candidate. And the aspect that I really enjoyed the most, and I think every member of the Conservative Party would probably say the same thing, we like the ability to knock on that door. Not knowing who's going to answer it, not knowing what mood they're going to be in, not knowing if we're catching them at a good time, bad time, or indifferent, is having that ability to engage with that voter one-on-one. Whether it takes 30 seconds or 5 minutes or 10 minutes, it doesn't matter so long as you are communicating. But one thing that I heard consistently, and I've been canvassing for other candidates for at least 15 years. One thing I heard consistently was, what's with you politicians? I only see and hear from you at election time when you want my vote. And that resonated, Ryan, really well in my psyche. And when I became the candidate and I heard that same response, I said, you know what? You're right. But I'm going to do politics different. You are going to see me in between campaigns. And I've lived up to that promise, Ryan. In fact, and this is the example I wanted to share with you. Last Thanksgiving weekend, very miserable day in Brantford, cold. In fact, I think I had my winter parka on. It was a Saturday afternoon. I'm knocking on doors, not handing out anything. Knocked on one door. They immediately recognized me as their member. And they said, Mr. Brock, what are you doing here? This is Thanksgiving weekend. And I smiled and I said, I'm just checking in. I want to wish you a happy Thanksgiving. And if there's anything I can do for you, here's my card. Reach out. Be happy to help. And that person left with a smile. And I think that resonated well as to how I want to contribute differently to my community. So I think most politicians, I can probably speak for most of my colleagues in the Conservative caucus, we all have that mindset. We care deeply and passionately about our community, but again, also for the rest of Canada.
Well, and this is what I think Canadians are going to be looking for, is a different type of politician. And I think we are seeing this, start to evolve within the Conservative Party, within the new candidates that are being nominated. People see them and they say, that doesn't look like a politician. Well, I think that's the point. And they're seeing people like, paramedics and plumbers and not only lawyers and doctors become politicians. They're seeing that anyone from all walks of life can contribute and can become a member of Parliament. And to the Conservative slogan, I think that's mining the common sense of the common people to bring it into Parliament, because we need people from all walks of life representing constituents from all walks of life.
Correct.
So what's been the vibe of the Conservative Party at large over the last, I would say, even 6 months? Because the energy seems to be shifted. That's kind of what we're seeing in a positive way.
The energy level is through the roof. I can't talk to any colleague who's not enthusiastic and thinking about the future and thinking how we are going to lead as a very effective conservative government. We've all been, knocking on doors. We've all been helping out other candidates in swing ridings to share the conservative message, to ensure that those campaigns are campaign ready. We're so eager to get back to the Hill. Now, in my case, my summer was literally filled with the Hill because, we forced Parliament to continue. We had numerous committee meetings at Public Accounts, at Government Operations, and it was a real privilege for me to continue prosecuting this corrupt government. That's what I do. I want to hold people accountable. When I was a prosecutor, I was results driven. I received a case, recognized the problem, took it to trial, found a solution, right? No different. We identify issues, we identify problems as politicians, we enact a plan, we execute that plan. That's how we are going to do politics differently. It's completely the opposite with Justin Trudeau and his corrupt government.
Well, and I have to say, it is something watching you thunder away at these witnesses in committee. We say half in jest, but half seriousI that when you get going, we almost feel guilty. It's like I had said one time, it's like, okay, I admit it, I did it. I don't know what I did, but I did it.
It reminds me, if you can indulge me for 1 minute, my bosses would often put me into bail court, particularly with opposition bail matters. And I recall this one particular case, a very significant accused, long record, committing the same crime over and over and over again.
Justin Trudeau?
Yeah. So he called a witness to act as his supervisor. They're known as sureties. And, most crowns ask the typical straightforward questions and then try to make the pitch as to why that person should be detained. But I viewed it as an opportunity to test the character of that particular witness. And I went at this witness 10 ways to Sunday. Instead of a typical 5-minute to 10-minute cross-examination, this lasted 1 hour. And I wasn't done yet. And finally, after 1 hour, the accused said, "I give up. I don't want to hear Brock anymore. I'll consent to my detention." It's just being relentless. And that's me. I see an issue. I want to make sure that everything is exposed on that issue. And that's why I enjoy exposing the corruption with the procurement problems that we have, with the scandals that you identified. We still have to go at it. There are still a number of witnesses that need to be called. And I hope for the opportunity to continue that prosecution.
Well, and it's interesting because if anyone has heard Garnet Jennis, he has a nickname for you, and he just calls you Larry the Prosecutor.
Yes. So, as does the leader. As the leader, yes.
Well, if the shoe fits, right?
Yes.
So,
yes.
But I think it does give Canadians some sort of, I'll say, I don't know if the word's comfort, or I don't know if the word, it's probably satisfaction, I would say, when they see people like yourself, like Michael Barrett, like Garnet Jennis, Stephanie Koozie, Kelly Block,
and the Coop Dog.
And the Coop Dog, Michael Cooper, which we have to get on the show.
Yes.
Just show that, there is no patience for corruption. There is no patience for lies. Yeah. And that at least in making these people really uncomfortable, it's something tiny. It's not near the accountability that people want, but at least it feels like you're getting Canadians licks in for them. Mm-hmm. So on behalf of all of our viewers, thank you to you and your team for as you say, the relentless pursuit of accountability in this.
You're quite welcome.
So Jagmeet Singh pulled the stunt of the year recently when he announced that the NDP was ending the supply and confidence agreement, and he did it at the most bizarre time, unless you consider that the only reason he did it was because of the upcoming by-elections on Monday the 16th. So, as everybody recognized and Pierre recognized, Jagmeet Singh only had one answer for every question, which was he's ripped up the agreement, an election may come sooner than later, and all of this stuff. So I think Canadians at first were excited. Then they were realistic in that they didn't really believe that he was going to vote against the Liberals. But now we have the Bloc kind of rubbing their hands together. And we've talked about this strategically, based on the Bloc's demands, which we've thoroughly reviewed. It wouldn't really be a smart idea for Justin Trudeau to accommodate a lot of this, because he would be almost pausing a lot of the government legislation and money to really focus on the Bloc's demands, spend money on that province, and ignore his main core ridings, which he needs to deliver for, which is the GTA. So what was the take of the Conservative Party on the Bloc kind of stepping in? I imagine it was expected to some degree.
Well, I think it was, and I think it just demonstrates how opportunistic the leader of the Bloc party and his members truly are. Time after time after time, they voted in favor of carbon taxes. Now we hear from Jagmeet Singh that he's not in favor of the current form of the carbon tax, but he wants to implement something else, but doesn't provide any specifics. So both he and the Bloc, in my view, are completely opportunistic leaders representing parties that do not speak for all of Canada. And you're quite correct. It's going to be a very difficult balancing act for the Prime Minister. How he executes that remains to be seen. But what's not lost on me as well is the by-elections happening this particular Monday and the timing around that. So depending on the results of those by-elections, that may change the focus of those particular leaders and how they're going to vote. But you can expect our party to be introducing all kinds of confidence motions. I have every reason to believe the first confidence motion will be introduced this week during our first opposition day, with a vote potentially as early next week. So that's going to be our focus. We want a carbon tax election, either put up or shut up, okay? Jagmeet Singh, you said you're not in favor? Well, then don't vote in favor of the government. We'll see how he plays that out.
Yeah, and the one thing that he has said that really resonates with Tanya and I is Canadians are done with Justin Trudeau. But I think what he should have added after that is, but I'm not done with Justin Trudeau. And it amazes me just from a strategic point of view. It doesn't even matter what the NDP platform is, but how badly the NDP just keeps making these missteps over and over and over. And they have to see the polls like the rest of us, like they're sinking. They're just taking on water, and I believe they were down to 15% in one of the recent polls. Yeah. How can they think this is a winning strategy? Like, do they think they're smart, or are they really this poor at making decisions?
I don't think they're smart at all. If you want to be blunt, they're not getting the best advice, and you're right. The public they're done with them, right? There's just no credibility at all with that particular party, that particular leader, and its members. They, as you know, over the course of the last 2 years and a bit, that the supply and confidence agreement had been created, yeah, you would hear them ferociously criticize the government in the House, quite often at committee, and then blindly support. You can't have it both ways. If you stand for everything, you're not standing for anything that's important to you. And what's important to MPs should be to their constituents and to Canadians. And they've routinely failed to deliver.
Last question I have for you is on Mark Carney. So,
Carbon tax Carney.
Carbon tax Carney. Sorry, I mispronounced his name.
Yeah, sorry. Had to interrupt. Okay.
So, there was lots of speculation at the beginning of the summer after the Toronto St. Paul by-election, and all of these kind of leaks started to come out of the Prime Minister's office, but Chrystia Freeland not doing a great job, and even some of the top media political commentators were saying she'll be done as finance minister at the end of the summer. So then in comes Carbon Tax Carney as a Liberal hire working for the Liberal Party. Yet, based on what he's saying, is that he's going to be helping direct the financial strategy of the federal government of Canada. So, given that he is effectively now the shadow finance minister, or the phantom finance minister, we have our own shadow finance minister, and Michael Barrett's criticism about this, in that because he's being paid by the Liberal Party and not a public servant, he doesn't have to disclose anything. Is that, to us, is that something that deserves a summons to committee for Mark Carney to explain his conflicts and his entanglements?
Absolutely. Absolutely, and I would expect a summons to be issued, not a summons, but a request initially. Fails to attend at that request, then potentially that could result in a summons. But I think, yeah, he's got a lot of questions to answer.
And is that going to be, do you think, a ethics committee or a public accounts?
It could be at both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
both mandates would find a way to link in the importance of his attendance.
Well, if and when that happens, we look forward to the relentlessness assault from Larry the prosecutor and Coop Dog and the rest of the crew.
Exactly.
And we will be following with great interest. But again, on behalf of Canadians, thank you for everything you do, Mr. Brock. You give Canadians hope that there does exist something called a politician with integrity.
Well, I'll end with this. You commented about the leader's mantra that, we are the servants, you are the masters. The last almost 3 years, September the 20th will be my 3rd year anniversary post my election. It has been an absolute honor and privilege to serve this nation and to serve the good constituents of Brantford Brant.
Thank you very much for being on the show again, Mr. Brock. We look forward to having you back.
Thank you.